All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you're settled in. Got a chance to introduce yourself to someone sitting next to you if you haven't already. My name is Marcellus Hammonds, and on behalf of Studio 17, I'd like to just thank you for being here today. This serves as our capstone class for UST 611, and over the past 5 months, we've had the pleasure of serving the city of Bedford and First Suburbs Consortium as our client. And today you'll hear a comprehensive plan for the downtown city of Bedford, and plans for redevelopment. So our studio name is Studio 17, and the plan is called Bridging Bedford, a historic downtown plan linking past and future. And before we jump in, you'll hear from the director of the College of Levin, Dr. Wukic, and then I'm going to pass it to our professors, Dr. Hildy and Professor Kostelik, to say a few words, and then we'll jump into our presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to celebrate this class's accomplishments. How many people are students in this class? I want to get an idea of who's in the room. Do we have parents and friends and supporters? Thanks for coming. Thank you very much. And we also have friends, clients, colleagues from Bedford, mayor and city manager, members of council and the city. Really appreciate everything that you've done for this class. For those who don't know, this class is the capstone for our Masters of Urban Planning and Development program, and it's very much an applied experience. It's the definition of applied learning and experiential learning, and we value it very much here. And I'd argue that it's really the hidden gem of Cleveland State's it's Cleveland State's hidden gem when it comes to our contribution to the region and to our communities. Last year, for example, Mayor Bibb and Laura Bloomberg, who's the president of the university, asked us to focus on the lakefront. And so Professor Hildy and Professor Kostelik and the students from last year's planning studio, Capstone, created a plan that made the waterfront, the lakefront, more accessible to Cleveland residents, which was a great project, and I hope that it's implemented. This year, obviously, you worked on Bedford. A lot of work. I can't wait to see what you've come up with for our clients, our colleagues from Bedford. Before we move any further, though, let's acknowledge how important, like the integral role, the really important role that our colleagues from Bedford played, both in terms of their monetary contributions, their subject matter expertise, and just exposing us to this problem set. So let's give our colleagues from Bedford a round of applause. And then finally, let's recognize that creating this kind of learning opportunity, this experience, takes time and energy and foresight and subject matter expertise from the professor's side. So let's thank Professor Hildy and Professor Kostelik again for coming through this year again in a big way and creating this great learning opportunity for everybody. So anyway, students, I'm really excited to see what you've come up with. Congratulations on your work, and congratulations, and I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope that you have a great Saturday, a great graduation day. So without any further ado, I'm handing the baton over to Professor Hildy. Thanks, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Cinco de Mayo, right? More like happy Planning Studio Presentation Day. We're so happy you can be here. I love teaching this class. As Director Wukic noted, this is sort of where students bring their planning skills together to work on an applied project in a studio format. Our clients for this year are the City of Bedford and the Northeast Ohio First Suburbs Consortium. Thank you again for your support as clients of this class. In this class, we teach, among other things, collaboration, reliability, professionalism, communication, problem solving, critical thinking, and more. And we think these are really important skills for our students to keep practicing before they are able to get out of here. They've done a great job, and we can't wait to see what they have come up with. The Village of Bedford, was incorporated in 1837, so it's therefore one of the oldest municipalities in the county. The city currently has a population of about 13,000 residents. Many of the buildings in the downtown area were constructed in the 19th century, and the downtown corridor, Broadway Avenue, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So this capstone project is focusing on the preservation of this built heritage through historic preservation guidelines, recommendations for restoration, revitalization of vacant and underutilized properties within the downtown area. In addition, students have developed recommendations for the adjoining former Bedford Hospital site. So that's my intro, and I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Jim Kostelik. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Hildy. Well, during the first phase of the plan, the students heard from several guest speakers who share their knowledge and expertise about the city of Bedford and some of the issues that the students would be dealing with. The students also compiled questions for a public survey and identified several stakeholders who were interviewed for the project. The class preferred, they prepared survey results, market analyses, design drawings, and planned recommendations for the area. In addition to their plan, the students completed several other tasks, including developing graphics and maps, formulating the final project and a report with that, preparing a PowerPoint presentation, which you are about to see, making all the arrangements for tonight's event, and constructing a website for the project, which should be operational in the very near future. Over the past 23 years that I've been involved in this course, I've had the pleasure of working with so many extremely talented students. I see several of our former Capstone students are here today, and they're all working and enjoying the fruits of their labors here in the Capstone class. This class this year has been no exception. They've been working very hard over the last several weeks, and Dr. Hildy and I greatly appreciate all the efforts they've made in putting this whole thing together. I know they were here yesterday, Sunday afternoon, working on their final presentation rehearsal. So I want to thank them very much for all their efforts, and I hope that you enjoy the results of their presentation. Marcellus?
And on behalf of the group, again, just thank you both, Professor Hildy and Professor Kostelik, for all your time and insight. You've helped us along the way to be able to be ready for today. So without further ado, we're going to introduce the project area. This concept map here just shows you the overview of the study area. Predominantly, we focused on the historic downtown district, but we also integrated aspects of Bedford Reservation, considered the Bedford Auto Mile, the former UH hospital site, as well as Willard Park. So what's our mission and our vision? Bridging Bedford aligns connectivity, economic development, and historic guidelines to create a sustainable, prosperous, and welcoming downtown Bedford. Our vision is that downtown Bedford is a desired destination for residents, businesses, and visitors. Ongoing preservation and investment leverages Bedford's heritage as a driver for economic opportunity and sustainability. Seamlessly connected with surrounding areas, Bedford will serve as a gateway to the Cleveland Metro Park's Bedford Reservation and an abundance of outdoor amenities. Into this next phase, we'll cover existing conditions where you'll hear about demographics and the history of Bedford. We also developed a SWOT analysis to talk about the current conditions, precedent study plans, the vacancy and current housing market, as well as community engagement in our survey process. So without further ado, I will pass it to my colleague, Conrad.
So thank you, everybody, for being here. So as planners, we're so often thinking about the future, but I wanted to start us off here by covering a little bit about the past. Why even care about history to start? Well, I think it comes down to one simple phrase of history creates place across time. And if we're going to honor the communities that we're serving as planners, we need to understand where they came from and kind of what values they hold. And this could take the form of looking at the built environment, determining a coherent city aesthetic, and that can be building materials, but that could also be, you know, banners and lots of different design features that we're going to be focusing on later on in the presentation. And of course, finally, this could take the form of a desire to leave a legacy, and we hope that this presentation can lead towards inspiring a community to build their own legacy. So starting off, just like pretty much anywhere else in the nation, Bedford's and Northeast Ohio was home to a number of First Nations or American Indian peoples. And that ranges from anywhere from the Shawnee, Iroquois Confederacy, Ojibwa people, and even the Erie people, which is where Lake Erie gets its name from. In the late 1700s up to 1803, this area was actually part of Connecticut in some sense. It was known as the Connecticut Western Reserve. This was a holdover of its colonial holdings, and it claimed a strip of land reaching all the way out into the Pacific Ocean. And this is where the term Western Reserve comes from. This was Connecticut's Western territories. But starting in 1803, this became the state of Ohio, and soon thereafter, Bedford was founded, being, as Dr. Hildy mentioned, one of the oldest municipalities in Ohio, or in Cuyahoga County at least. And the proximity to Tinkers Creek and the Ohio and Erie Canal led this to be a thriving area in what was to be an industrial age for the United States. As a transportation hub, Bedford opened new railroad bridges across Tinkers Creek, utilized the waters of Tinkers Creek to produce electricity and power for mills, along the aforementioned canals and railroads. This brought a number of famous people through Bedford as they traveled to places like Cleveland, Akron, and beyond. And our group, we want to highlight two core features of Bedford's history. That would be their industry and the racial justice aspect. And I'd like to call this kind of a two railroads feature, right? We have this physical and this more imaginative railroad, but the first being the literal rail lines that brought industrious pioneers seeking the American dream, people like Benjamin Franklin Fitch, founder of Taylor Chair Company. And, you know, we also have recently celebrating their 100-year anniversary, Lakeshore Electric. So this is a community that's had strong local businesses despite its relatively small size. But there's also this more, the Underground Railroad, not a visible railroad, but a path towards freedom that ran throughout Northeast Ohio. And as this mural presents, there's a history of Bedford residents banding together and helping people produce a more just society. And to wrap up my section, that we want to emphasize that Bedford already exists in a strong pre-existing historical landscape. The National Register of Historic Places and the national parks have delineated these several buildings as well as the entire downtown core as national historic sites. And we just believe that Bedford should double down on this, introducing more educational signage, more banners, more pride in its historic heritage, and preserving this neighborhood character that the downtown core so adequately presents outward into adjacent properties that our later speakers are going to touch on potential development opportunities there. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Alex, who's going to tell you a little bit about the existing conditions of Bedford's demographics.
Now that Conrad brought us up to the present day, we can use demographic data to set a socioeconomic baseline to measure the results of our implementation recommendations against in the future and to get an idea of who this project will serve. So first, looking on the left, You can see population in Bedford steadily declined up until pre-COVID. And there was a large bump during COVID as people moved back home with their parents, came back to their hometowns, things like that, and kind of hunkered down. And they've started to leave since then, but we're still well above pre-COVID, and we're even right around 2015. So we can retain that population and keep that momentum going. On the right, you can see households with children. The tan area is households without children, which makes up 81% of the population. So you have 19% with children compared to 30 in the Cleveland metro area. We can guess that these differences are due to regional perceptions of school districts and opportunities for children. But once you look within the city's households with children, you see a large majority are of schooling age. So people in the city do strongly believe in the school system, and it's just about spreading that message to the rest of the region and drawing in young families. Speaking of education, on the left, I'll call your attention to the top two bars, which represent bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees. That makes up 23% of the eligible population compared to 35% for the county, which indicates a need not only to educate existing populations better and provide them opportunities, but bring in highly educated people who have disposable income, well-paying jobs, are starting families, things of that nature. And on the right, we see income. The low end is a bit skewed since this includes residents over 15, so it could be high schoolers, it could be retirees, people not working full-time. So that doesn't matter too much. But as you look through the middle, you see a pretty normal distribution, but a very, very large number on the high end, which is great for the city and presents some great momentum to build from and maybe figure out, what's drawing these high-income people into the city. So with that, I'll turn things over to our zoning expert, Anthony.
So generally, we find that the zoning code tends to reflect a little bit better some of the needs of Bedford's past, but could be very well tailored to meet the needs of residents today. So overall, it's pretty dominated by like single family units and automobile infrastructure. However, our own survey data really indicates the residents would like to see some greater diversity of housing types, while also improving some other alternate modes of transportation as well. Now, that said, there are some provisions within the code which really do emphasize a lot of that historic character for the historic downtown district in particular, which really makes up most of our study area. So for instance, building heights are capped at roughly 3 stories. Also, there are no front yard setbacks required as well. So you really get that sort of like historic, charming downtown feel that draws a lot of residents to begin with. Also, there's more of an emphasis overall on preserving the infrastructure that's already there, as opposed to replacing it with something new. Now, that said, parking requirements within the district could be waived by the Planning Commission. However, this is a pretty long and lengthy process. Furthermore, we find that the minimums are pretty burdensome as is, as the cost per parking tends to range, and these are conservative estimates, mind you, between roughly like $5,000 and $10,000. And we also find that this can be a hindrance to new development opportunities as well. Now, within the residential districts which surround our study area, we would note that single family is permitted, but other housing types are deemed like a conditional use. So much like with the parking requirements, this tends to go through a bit of a longer process of not necessarily getting immediate approval, and thus tends to delay development for some much needed smaller units as well. Now, we should also note that typically it's about 2 parking units are typically required for any given development. However, this is somewhat excessive given the fact that census data indicates that roughly only half of residents have more than 1 car at their disposal anyway. And the final thing we would note is that accessory dwelling unit opportunities are fairly limited, given the fact that they have to typically be located to the rear of whatever principal structure is, and also typically can take up no more than roughly 1/3 of the yard space as well. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Chris, who's going to do going to describe our housing and market analysis.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about housing and retail market analysis that we performed. So jumping into housing, to study a housing market, particularly in the context of looking at adding new housing, you have to first decide what area actually makes up that housing market. So in the suburban context, a market area is generally very dependent on schools. And in Bedford, along with its neighbor Maple Heights, we are kind of on an island of school quality right now, where the surrounding districts very much outperform them. So for our market area, we used a collection of census tracts, which encompass all of Maple Heights and almost all of Bedford without dipping into any other municipalities. So to perform housing analysis, we assume people are spending at most around 30% of their income on housing, and then measure households by income against housing supply by cost to see where there is need for more. So where you see green on the screen, there is demand, and where you see red, there is oversupply. So in the top table, the for sale housing market, there is more than an adequate amount of homes in these bottom three brackets priced 150,000 and under, which make up the bulk of the area's housing stock. And in the rental market, the bottom table, we see the need for deeply affordable units with rent under $500 per month, and then a lot of demand kind of around that median income and up. There's almost always demand at this high end, like you see, just because people tend not to consume housing at the maximum capacity they could. And then at the bottom end, just because the housing needs to be so low cost. So we want to make sure that any new housing we plan for is both feasible and impactful. So we wanted to introduce this housing study, not only to give a picture of the situation in the area, but to inform recommendations we'll make later on. So in our recommendations, we will be looking at targeting these two sections of the market you see with arrows pointing to them. So at rentals, affordable for people making under $10,000 a year and those making between 50 and 75. Then lastly, on housing, those supply and demand figures don't tell the entire story. There's some other critical factors at play too. There's a very old housing stock, there's high vacancy, and it is majority single family detached housing in the area. So a lot of the housing supply present is affordable, but probably not in ideal physical condition. And we do not have a lot of density right now, kind of working to fill out those housing needs. So moving on to retail, to study the retail market, we calculate how much purchasing power is present in the area by the number of households present and their average income, along with how much physical retail space there is currently occupied there. So from there, we calculate if there's enough purchasing power to support more. So this market area is shaped by drive time. That's how people shop. So it's a little bit more formulaic and simple that you see on the screen. We generally focus on these grocery and general merchandise markets as this kind of barometer of the retail market as a whole. The grocery market is really representative of the ability to support an anchor retail store, while general merchandise mostly measures the presence and spending capture of these retail giants where people buy everything now, like Target or Walmart. So looking at this, what we see in green is that there's some room for growth in everything except this 10-minute drive general merchandise category. But in a historic downtown, an anchor does not have to be something traditional, like a grocery store, and smaller, more niche merchandisers can fill their own role too, especially when you have outside visitors regularly coming to the area like we hope to attract to Bedford. And then lastly, I want to contextualize this study with the fact that downtown Bedford has a pretty large vacancy issue to remedy. Based on a walking inventory we did, there's roughly 23,000 square feet of vacancy downtown on Broadway. It's a large issue, but is also an opportunity for the city to get more involved with downtown property owners and accommodate new desirable uses. So with that, I am going to pass it off to my colleague Brittany, who's going to talk a bit about the existing streetscape in downtown.
So starting off, this is our focus area. This is what we'll be talking about just as we continue on through phase 1 and phase 2. Our area of study focuses on the historical downtown and incorporates the University Hospital site that falls just after the Bedford Auto Mile. The 5-point intersection is the gateway to downtown using the main streets of Broadway, Columbus, and Willis. Secondary streets flow out into the residential areas. Willis is also proposed as a bike trail that'll connect to the Bedford Reservation. Circled in orange is a node, or a space that you can find yourself inside of that is strongly felt when walking across this intersection. The open street, located in the south of the map, is in purple, is a street dedicated to pedestrians only. Something to highlight as we move through our presentation. The triangle portion of our focus area hosts the University Hospital site, which have since migrated out of the city, leaving the area unfortunately underutilized and just a few buildings left in service. The city's efforts in purchasing the land gives an opportunity to revitalizing the area based on the community's needs, which we'll elaborate as we move forward. So as we talk about existing conditions of the historical downtown, we zoom into a pedestrian view. We can look at the existing streetscape that's located on the main street of our focus area, Broadway Avenue. The main corridor holds two-way single lane traffic on either side. There is also parallel parking in front of businesses that align the downtown. This offers the safest method where cars and pedestrians can coexist because of the narrow crossings and bufferings due to the protection of parked cars, shortened due to the distance while crossing. and still gives the opportunity for drivers to pull through up to storefronts that they're interested in. Additionally, there's other public parking lots that can be found in the rear parking of the building sprinkled around the town. It's also very important to note what downtown Bedford already has to offer in the streetscape. Broadway has a healthy 10 to 12-foot wide sidewalk with amenities located on the outer area, also acting as a buffer to automobiles. This includes trees, benches, lighting, decor, pavers, and landscaping in efforts to beautify the downtown area. All of these amenities promote a change of place, letting the person or driver acknowledge the area as a destination to slow down or an invitation to spend time in the city. Continuously, the existing build-out on Broadway currently has a strong presence on the street, with buildings to the sidewalks with 0 front yard setbacks to promote safety, cohesiveness, as well as the window shopping and retainment of visitors walking past local shops to potentially stop in, dine, or mosey. This gives a higher quality of pedestrian experience to those on foot. Unfortunately, as Chris mentioned, there is a vacancy issue, but Bedford has the existing structures to flip that into a positive opportunity for a new local retail. And next up, we have existing plans and connectivity with Diane.
I feel like I get to talk about all the fun stuff. This is an exciting project. The city of Bedford, it's did an exchange of 2 exchanges where they took 12 acres of property and exchanged that with, gave that to the Cleveland Metro Parks, and in exchange they formed this partnership. And this is exciting there. This formed the Viaduct Park with Cleveland Metro Parks. So this is bringing more people into the city of Bedford, and through wayfinding, which we're going to talk about later, and some of the plans, this forms a great partnership to bring more people into Bedford. Another great partnership that's happening in Bedford is the partnership with NOACA and the total, the Transportation Living for Livable Communities Initiative, which brings in biking, more commuter traffic paths for throughout the city. So what they did a study with Envision and NOACA, and they invited 200 individuals, and 90% were from the community, and they did surveys and found out what they liked about the area, what they didn't like. And they found that 60% of the people that they visited downtown for leisure, shopping, and evening traffic and events and dining. Their concerns were pedestrian safety and cycling, which they proposed some shared bike trails, and they did some studies on that, which we're going to also talk about later. And they had some plans to do. They came up with 2 plans for the bike paths, and through their studies, they found the second alternative was the most preferred one. As we just talked about, the 5-way intersection is a little bit of a danger for people, and they don't feel real comfortable about it. So the second alternative connects to Viaduct Park. It goes down Willis. It cuts across to their Center Park here. It cuts through downtown and then connects over to the library. This plan was also done before they knew they had the hospital site, which is here, which that's one of their disadvantages, is they were going to need an easement with the park, and we're going to talk more about that later. And then they recommended going down Center Street, which we're also going to talk about later. So there's a lot of interest in improving Bedford. So these are really exciting 2 partnerships that make these connections really are going to be a reality that's going to happen. So that's very exciting stuff for Bedford. Next, we have our SWOT analysis with Najee.
All right, so a SWOT analysis. We'll be going over strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So all these different components that my colleagues have gave us earlier, we put them in these little different boxes just to kind of visualize how we see all these different things. So one of the first things that my colleagues have talked about a lot is that Bedford is in a historic business district. So this allows this area access to some historic preservation funds. So that's amazing. We're trying to make all these different changes. Another thing, we have a presence of local businesses that are supporting. So we kind of talked about the vacancies that are on our main street, but we have some amazing commercial businesses such as BBG, we have Lakeshore Electric, and then even down Broadway, we have all of those different car lots. So jobs bring people, people can come to here, and that's what we literally need in Bedford. Let's just bring people here. Another thing, as you can see, we have the University Hospital site that some of my colleagues pointed out earlier. That's amazing. Bedford has infrastructure that we can leverage. So it's not just a clean slate. There are things that can be shifted that we already have here. Another really important thing when you're trying to implement these different changes and strategies is having a supportive government. So we don't have government, then all these changes will just be suggestions. So having a supportive government is really pivotal when we're trying to make these different suggestions. Now, here are some of the weaknesses that we saw. One that Chris referred to earlier, we have a 3 out of 5 in regard to our school report card. The second bullet here, a lack of wayfinding signage. Our team took a walking tour of this area, and we thought it would be really beneficial to enhance the overall experience. For example, where's parking? How far is the Bedford reservation? These are things that just make the experience better. Another thing we saw that Bedford does not have a CDC. A CDC in this capacity is a community development corporation, and what they have to do is kind of get the community together, let people know what's going on, letting people be in the know about what's going on within this area. Another thing, we saw 2 tax service businesses in the area, and we think it's such a small area, we will benefit from some diversity within the businesses here. Some opportunities. If you look at this top beautiful picture, that is the Bedford Reservation. So we have this beautiful amenity here. We have downtown Bedford. How can both of these things leverage one another and kind of bring momentum and traction to this area? Another thing that some of my colleagues talked about earlier was expanding some housing. There are also other vacancies that can be like communal green spaces. So again, Bedford has things that we can work with. Another thing here, just again, leveraging the traction between both these areas to kind of promote events, promote traction, and just get people into Bedford Reservation as well as downtown Bedford. Another thing is we have some opportunities for some Main Street infrastructure enhancements that you saw earlier. So these look like bump outs, speed bumps, or even just bringing some more light into this area. The last thing we see here is some threats. So we did kind of talk about the economic instability within our main district. So just talking about some of those vacancies along the Main Street. So those are things that we could work with. Also, there's competition. So when you think about the surrounding cities, so when we're thinking about places like Oakwood, Solon, how can we make Bedford the best destination? Another thing you see here, you're looking at this image here, this is a crossing here. And when we did our walking tour, we said, maybe this will benefit from some pedestrian crossing just to enhance the overall safety and experience in this area. And then another thing that some of my colleagues talked about earlier was our design guidelines. So essentially, a developer could kind of come in and do whatever they want. But if we have some of these guidelines, that will help us to keep that historic identity here. So we have to show how we'll leverage these opportunities and these strengths, and then at the same time, kind of combat these weaknesses and these threats. So now I will bring it to Erica.
Okay, hi. I lost my voice yesterday, so we're just gonna roll with it. So apologies for my voice. So I was a part of the community engagement group for this project to understand better what downtown Bedford is in the community of the city of Bedford. We conducted a walking tour to analyze the study area as well as the built environment. To collect survey data, we visited the Bedford Public Library over 2 weekends, as well as a QR code passed around the community. This yielded over 80 survey results from local residents and visitors. We also organized 13 stakeholder interviews with local business owners and city leaders. So one of the questions we asked was, how long have you lived in Bedford? Majority of residents either lived in Bedford for a long period of time or were newer to the neighborhood. So 37% were 1 to 5 years, or 37% was 21 years or above. In the middle was 11 to 20 years at 15%, and 6 to 10 years was 9%. So this indicates a wide array of longevity in the city of Bedford. Age breakdown. Majority of respondents are between the age of 41 and 65 years old at 38%, 66 years or older, and 25 to 40 are almost tied for second place at 29% and 28%. The lower end of our age bracket was 18 to 24 at 4% of respondents. So what attracts you to downtown Bedford? Events, shopping, and running errands are what brings majority of respondents to the area. Restaurants, dining are also another way that people are attracted to the space. Viaduct Park at 15% is what brings the least amount of respondents to the area. What prevents you from visiting downtown Bedford? Not enough things to do at 38% is the largest reason why respondents did not visit downtown Bedford more. 32% of respondents chose the open-ended option of other. Responses consisted of not enough places to eat or shop, or they didn't have enough information on what things were going on in the area. How often do you use the metro parks near downtown? Most respondents went rarely or never use the metro parks near downtown. The few that went once a week, once a month, or a few times a month. So majority were rarely using the space near the metro parks. So what would you like to see more of in downtown Bedford? Increased activation is obviously desired in downtown Bedford, with dining, events, and small businesses being the top 3 reasons what they would like to see more of downtown Bedford. There was also desire for activities targeting families and children in green space. All of this infrastructure is already there in the downtown Bedford space. On top of the infrastructure is already there, so building on top of what downtown Bedford already has will increase potential for visitation. So what is one word you would use to describe downtown Bedford? Scenic, quaint, and calm were all words used to describe downtown Bedford. Underwhelming and boring were also words used to describe the space. Based off of the survey results, respondents acknowledged the beauty and small town feel of downtown Bedford, but they want more. Based off of these results, it gave us a good idea on how Bedford could redesign the space to change the adjectives from boring and underwhelming to exciting and fun. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kenya and Quentin to discuss the stakeholder analysis.
So Kenya and I, we had the great opportunity to be able to really gather all of the information that we received from our stakeholder interviews and be able to understand how we can collaborate the information that we got from the stakeholders to be able to connect that with the residents and also visitors to be able to bridge that and make an overall better district for everyone. And so we had 5 basic things that we kind of focused on to figure out the best ways to make these recommendations. And that had to do with economic development, housing, and also how to enhance, like Erica was talking about, adding special events and also restaurants to be able to just add diversity and more vibrant activity to be able to add to the space. And so, I thought I did that already. Again, adding long-term businesses that can be anchor businesses. And so with this being a historic district, we want to find ways to be able to tie cultural restaurants and businesses to be able to just be able to enhance that identity even more within the district. So that way, also businesses can also support each other. So another thing that we heard in this stakeholder interviews was that if there was an opportunity for business owners to collaborate with one another, support one another, so that way each business can be supported and thrive, so that way it can sustain and be able to stay there and not have such a high turnover in terms of the commercial corridor area. And in terms of the restaurant, Restoring and Bridge in Bedford, it's a multifaceted endeavor, as I said, including strategic planning, historic preservation, as you heard earlier, as well as community engagement. Stakeholders want to activate public spaces. That was a big thing that we heard, was that they want to activate spaces to be able to increase walkability and also visibility for the individual business owners. And another thing that we heard was live entertainment. Live entertainment was another thing, and also additional outdoor dining opportunities is another thing that we heard. And so co-working spaces was very interesting recommendation. I thought was noteworthy and could be really a really vibrant third space for residents and visitors to commune. And lastly, my classmates will go into detail more about recommendations based on the feedback that Kenya and I synthesized from the stakeholder interviews. And without further ado, I'll introduce Kenya to just elaborate more on some of the information that we received from the stakeholders.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope y'all doing okay. So like you were saying, I followed up with some recreational organizations and talked about what they wanted to see. And what we found was that they wanted to see more of a capitalization on green space and then the health and wellness opportunities for the underutilized spaces that Bedford currently has. Promotion of these spaces can definitely be improved, as we found out that a lot of residents that live there, they don't know about all of the little pocket parks that are currently present, and some of them don't even go to Viaduct Park because they don't know how accessible it is. Another thing that they hinted on was the fact that they believe that there's more opportunities to create permanent wayfinding throughout Bedford, and then there's also an opportunity to kind of create more of an identity for the downtown Bedford area as well. Moving on, we interviewed some public officials, and we found out that they were also looking for this new sense and this newfound identity to kind of become like anchored in downtown Bedford. They want to tell more of a story for people coming through, for the residents and visitors alike. They're open to collaborating with other neighboring cities such as Maple Heights, Bedford Heights, Oakwood, etc., to kind of hone in on this culture and this identity that they want to build. Lastly, we found out that they were looking for development of the hospital site. They're very, very excited to see what comes with that. And then lastly, we also interviewed residents directly. So what we found out was one of the main priorities for the residents that currently live there is that they want to see more resident-friendly amenities. So they want something there that's for them, by them in Bedford, because they don't think that there's a lot of that there currently. They're content with the walkability and overall feel of Bedford currently, but they're really worried about the rising crime rate. And then lastly, they're looking for more development overall, just like the public officials. They're interested in the future development of the hospital site, but then they also want more employment opportunities for residents that live there as well. So they want more jobs, they want more businesses, and this is kind of what Q was talking about earlier too. So they really just want a blend of that to come to the area. And without further ado, I will bring up Marcellus to talk about phase 2 recommendations that the class put together.
Thank you, everyone. So we talked about the existing conditions. You learned about survey data, what are residents thinking, what are current plans that are already in place. And as we move forward in our presentation, you'll hear about our phase 2 recommendations, which cover an analysis based off of the existing conditions, development opportunities that we think are viable for the area and that are sustainable for the city of Bedford. In particular, you will hear about the former hospital UH site. We'll talk about trail connections and new development opportunities that provide pedestrian safety and increased walkability. We'll also focus on policy regarding zoning, design guidelines, and signage, as well as addressing the vacancy challenges in downtown Bedford. And without further ado, I will bring up my colleague Anthony to talk more about zoning amendments for the area.
So, as we noted earlier, there's a few changes that we think could be made to the zoning code, which would be beneficial long-term. Starting with the historic downtown district, we believe that one of those would be to allow for more residences on the second and third stories of any given building. As we noted, it's currently tapped at 3 stories for the time being. However, it's also capped at just 6 units overall in those stories. We would recommend relaxing that a little bit more to like 10 to potentially facilitate more infill opportunities. And we would also recommend just a reassessment of the conditional and permitted uses throughout the district as well. Some of the ones which are prohibited in the zoning code, for instance, are actually currently present in downtown Bedford as is. And that could just help facilitate that as like just like a consistent updating of the zoning code going forward on a fairly fixed schedule. We would also recommend eliminating the parking minimums throughout downtown as well, given the fact that there is fairly ample street parking as well as parking lots available adjacent to the study area. Now, to continue along with parking and the residential districts in particular, we would just recommend reducing or amending the current parking standards as is, whether it be for specific uses, such as restaurants, which currently require roughly about like 1 space per 50 square feet, as well as 1 per employee on like whatever the maximum shift may be. We would also recommend reducing the minimum for single family homes from 2 down to 1. And then specifically for the residential districts, we would recommend as well to remove the conditional status from multifamily dwellings. That way we could just help facilitate some of those small units, which, as Chris noted, are in such high demand. We'd recommend doing the same thing with developments for ADUs as well. Ultimately, you could just have them located in addition to the rear of the principal structure, also off to the side where a lot of garages, which could be converted into ADUs, are already located in Bedford. And it would also provide just a nice little secondary income for residents as well. And with that, I'm going to invite my colleague Luke to come up here and detail the historic design guidelines.
Thank you, Anthony. So I will be talking about our downtown historic design guidelines. So the intention for our design guidelines is to protect the historic character of downtown Bedford. It's meant to guide the city when making decisions about development downtown, and it provides a template for creating a vibrant, attractive, and accessible business district. So on the screen here is the full list of the components of the design guidelines that we put together. For the sake of this presentation, I'll get into a few of them. So the first one was setbacks. So smaller setbacks create a pedestrian-oriented Main Street feel and promotes walkability in downtown. Allows for pedestrians to access building frontages a lot easier. So as you can see in this picture here, we have structures right up to the sidewalk, allows for easy access. Parking, subjecting parking to the rear of buildings allows for a continuous Main Street feel and allows for easier access again to from the pedestrian right away to building frontages. So as you can see here, we have our downtown district. Parking is subject to the back with all the storefronts fronting the street. Next one is landscaping. Here's a good example of what exists already in downtown Bedford. So we have this buffer that's between the downtown Main Street and the parking area in the back. So it creates that visually pleasing buffer, and it limits the interactions that people downtown have with vehicles in the back. Composition is important, is it maintains a unified look building structures downtown. So as you can see in this highlighted area of this picture, all the lower levels of this building are the same height, and all the upper levels of the building are the same height as well. So you don't have like a varying look of structures in downtown. The next one is lighting. So lighting is important as it creates a safe and welcoming downtown. Gives people the sense of place that they can be there, and it's a vibrant area. So here's a good example of we have street level lighting, but also lighting for cars. Scale is important as it ensures that downtown structures are not too different in height and width. So in this image here, we can see we have structures that are similar in height, and then we have one that's a little taller, but it doesn't throw off too much of the historic character of the downtown. Building facades, retaining materials of elements of original historic buildings is very important to keeping that historic nature of downtown. And then utilizing that same materials that exist in downtown in any new construction is also important. So as you can see here, this is a newer constructed building in downtown Berea's historic district. So as I said, newer construction, but they still incorporate that heavy brick character to it. Awnings are important to create a more attractive building facade and business district. So as you can see in this image here, we have well-maintained awnings that go down the front of the entire front of the building, and it complements the color well. The green trim on the building match the green awnings. And lastly, we have signage. Signage should be readable and not overly bright or distracting, and it should fit well on the building facade. So as you can see in this image here, the front of this building has a sign that's, can't really read it from this angle, but easily readable, fits the building well. Then you also have blade signage here that is easy to read for pedestrians that are coming down the sidewalk. Now I'm going to pass it off to Conrad for historic design preservation.
Continuing off of design guidelines, we want to briefly touch on historic design and the preservation of historic locations. And I think it can be narrowed down to this concept of maintain identity without deception or destruction. We largely found that, especially given the presence of National Historic Register sites already peppered throughout, there's not a ton of change that needs to be done in terms of the National Park Service already having well-established guidelines for historical preservation. On the other hand, we want to make sure that Bedford is, adequately doing this across the entire historic district, but then also expanding some of these guidelines where applicable to future developments and to existing areas outside of the National Register of Historic Places locations. Some of the core concepts would be retaining as many original elements of the existing buildings as possible. And when it comes to newer buildings, using similar building structures, similar architectural styles. A lot of these are early federal era architecture styles, emulating that without creating a false sense of history. That would be, we don't want to use existing locations for purposes that are completely inordinate to their original intention, unless that is adequately described in historical interpretive signage, because we understand that obviously not everything can work in the exact way it was promoted for initially. But we also don't want to make it so that new developments imply that they're more historical than they actually are. And then finally, retaining existing vegetation and natural topography wherever possible, not only to help with heat island effect, existing vegetation will promote cooler atmospheres, but the natural topography is going to be a lot more amenable to avoiding runoff situations and flooding than, you know, all that tar asphalt, parking spaces and all that. So next, we're gonna get into the real meat of the situation with a detailed policy for downtown economic redevelopment, and that's gonna be led by Dylan and Chris.
Hey y'all, how you doing? I'm Dylan. So before we talk about what we're recommending for economic development, it's important to know what we're dealing with, like the storefronts that we're dealing with already. So this is our professional and personal services. So professional services would be like your tax places, your lawyers, your realtors, and then your personal services would be your barber, the salon. I think there was a masseuse down there, just stuff like that. You can see that downtown has quite a lot of that. It can be good and bad. People come there for a specific reason. So sometimes they come there just for the salon, but they're not going and shopping and doing other things. So they go and get their haircut and they just kind of leave because there's maybe nothing that's keeping them there. There's just a lot of these that are specifically used by people. Downtown retail, restaurant, and bars. So Erica pointed out in our surveys that people said they wanted more restaurants and bars. And you can see that there's 4 locations of restaurants and bars downtown. And then there is some retail. It's mostly small local retail. So the only big name down there is Dollar General. And that's like big one towards the parking lot at the top. So that's Dollar General, and the rest are like boutiques or just smaller shops, more local shops. There is a few institutional. There was a Torah I saw in the signage, so I'm guessing that's Judaism. There was a servant ministry of gods, and then there was something for children on those side of the road for the institutional. And there's one historic house in the actual district that we focus on for downtown, and that was the Dunham House. There are a few buildings just to the south that are historic. New construction, we didn't really propose anything because it's pretty built out, but if there was going to be any infill development, we kind of proposed those 2 areas to kind of finish up the streetscape. And then there is that bike path that comes through the area. And then to the west, we have, they're already doing this, they already started doing this, is they're expanding Bedford Commons. And this is probably what we want to leave you with. Downtown's pretty vacant. So it's a threat to the vibrancy of downtown, but it's an opportunity to bring more business downtown. And we saw kind of like a lack of restaurants. So that could be a potential to add some restaurants, but Chris is going to get more into the nitty gritty with that.
Thank you, Tom. We have introduced all of this vacancy downtown, looked at how there's some retail stock in the market, and also heard a lot of feedback from residents and stakeholders about what kind of businesses they would want to see more of. So with that, we believe there are some city interventions that can help fill these vacancies and help to keep the downtown environment more active, both on the market building and on the property side. So on the market building side, this involves helping to activate downtown through increased promotion, programming, and events, as well as through partnerships and incentives with local businesses and organizations like the Metro Parks and the Auto Mile. This might be something as simple as working with like a dealership to get a business on board to do a lunch voucher program, or if someone's shopping, they can then take a $5 coupon to a restaurant downtown. And then on the property side, we would also recommend a program that incentivizes property owners to fill their storefronts. So the city would assist them with finding new tenants, addressing any legal or building code issues, making capital improvements to their spaces, and attempting to get them on board with a special improvement district to kind of help fund upkeep of the street. So on the building use side, the Broadway Cyclery and Bedford Falls Cafe were two examples of existing businesses downtown. We feel fit very well and can serve as examples of the kinds of businesses to work to attract going forward. Often these most important and anchoring spaces in historic downtowns like Bedford are non-traditional. They're places like these two. They're unique restaurants or bars, a small local food market, or stores in the same industry, like having both a bike store and a hiking store, which support one another and help bring a market to each other. Spaces that help people to spend an entire day downtown and can be family oriented are also very well received. So something like having a pottery workshop you can go to after taking a bike ride in the reservation and coming downtown for lunch can be a really good use and sustainable in a place like Bedford. So I am now going to invite Brittany and Kenya back up here to talk about opportunities for placemaking downtown.
So we found that placemaking is very important just in general, because it helps to orient residents and make them feel like this is more than just a place. It's kind of their home, right? And so to ensure that feeling, like we see a great opportunity for storytelling and then highlighting local narratives for Bedford, and some of which is already underway with small placards like Sammy's story, as you can see, second from the right. And we just kind of want to emphasize that and bring more of that homey feel and identity to Bedford. Sculptures and utility box wraps are kind of sprinkled already around Bedford, and this gives more of that updated and memorable identity that the residents and visitors are looking for. So wayfinding will go hand in hand with this approach. And so here we have an example of a simple yet direct wayfinding sign. So it follows like the current Metro Park signage that's there currently. And so a lot of the residents and visitors can kind of relate and basically that's what they've grown to know. They're already acquainted with that type of wayfinding signage. So we added a little twist. We added our own colors to give it more of that Bedford brand that we've been trying to build here and give it more of a feel for the residents to become acquainted with. And then following that up, we have some banners. And so the addition of banners is similar. And so they'll make an area feel more lively and bring more of that identity out. They also will cultivate a sense of pride when referencing one city. So if you guys could imagine, these are just placeholders for now, but if you could imagine it being more like seasonal, more adjusted for holidays, and maybe even have a chance to highlight like veterans, educational opportunities, arts and culture, festivals, just all types of events that would be seasonal for banners like this to be put up around Bedford, and it would help visitors and residents become more acquainted. Following up on that, Brittany has some additional placemaking recommendations.
Well, one of our main recommendations involved pedestrian safety. On the southern end of Broadway, there's an incomplete sidewalk which pushes foot traffic to cross in only one way. This is highlighted as we went out in person and experienced it for ourselves as a class back in February. Due to its proximity to the public square and the open street that's pedestrian only, it deserves a higher focus to putting pedestrians first. This can elevate the entryway towards the park and slow drivers down as they enter space with more people. On the top right is a photoshopped image showing the crosswalk facing north to complete the U shape, seen missing in the lower picture. Instead of the proposed hashing crosswalk for driver visibility, public art can also be incorporated here for a safer, vibrant walking experience near the public square. Going down the line, as pedestrians make their way through downtown, it's important to note events and community spaces that can utilize the area of public square. South Park Open Street and the proposed green space in the rear is currently under construction as we speak. Events can be led by the city, a potential nonprofit, or even the public for meetups or community gatherings as a third public space anyone can use. This can include large tented events with food trucks as shown on the rendering above, or even a small gathering of residents meeting up for book club outside on a weather permitting day. Another thing to note is that Bedford Reservation has various connections of hiking trails and mountain biking trails that either run through Bedford or connect through a different way through the town of the city. This is a great chance for Bedford to promote its own town to be a destination for locals or visitors alike that are either stopping in or need a break from the trails on their way home. Offering amenities, incentives, or even events that cater to these hobbies promote foot traffic or riders for existing businesses and economic development. So these are the current conditions when it comes to 631 Broadway Avenue. What you see here is a corner building that faces northwest and is the entry to the historic downtown coming in from the north past the Auto Mile. As drivers are waiting for traffic flow to move in the 5-point intersection, there's nothing really showing that this is a place for people to stop, nor does it pique interest. This offers an opportunity for the city to amplify its branding and placemaking as existing residents and potential visitors make their way through the downtown Bedford. As a recommendation to the city of Bedford, our team agrees in making the entryway to downtown area a gateway that's noticeably making an impact on residents or visitors. This gives the opportunity for pedestrians and multimodal users to slow down and notice that this is an entrance of place, not just a building. It gives drivers the courtesy to see something creative while they wait and potentially stop in. This also gives pedestrians a chance to interact with the mural for a backdrop in their pictures. Of course, this is just a placeholder image, but it would be a great idea for the residents and visitors who frequent the downtown to come together and pick a mural that speaks to the culture of the city. This also gives the community a sense of pride and ownership, helping to make decisions on the outcome of what they'll be seeing every day, giving it a sense of place. And next up, we'll have Diane to speak about the physical design and built environment.
As I was talking about earlier, the partnership between Bedford and the Cleveland Metro Parks have some really exciting plans. The Cleveland Metro Parks predicts some of their restoration and planned development will do what the development at Edgewater Park did for Battery Park. It's really exciting, some of the things they have. One of the biggest goals that they have, this is still in the works, this is not a guaranteed, but they're hoping that this happens, is a bridge that crosses Tinkers Creek. And what that will do, that will open the park up to the residents of Bedford or people on the trail system to come up into the city of Bedford. There's a lot of traffic already, people coming into the parks there. And if they had a way to cross and get up into the city, all sorts of biking clubs, mountain bike clubs, running clubs, there's so many different clubs that meet up for the park. This would be a nice way that they could park up here or park in the city, go grab some snacks or a drink after their ride or a place to meet up. This is going to be a really great addition. They're also extending the parking lot. Another exciting thing is they want to put a 4-season shelter in. That'd be here. So you can have weddings, parties. That's another thing that will help draw people into the community. A play area for the children. There's a lot of exciting things that can happen here. And then it would connect to the trail, which I will talk about next. So this is where we are here. This is Viaduct Park. I feel like my thing didn't show up, so I'm being a little surprised. But this is Viaduct Park here. So the trail would connect here. This is the entryway of Viaduct Park. Right now, this is the existing conditions. There's this big concrete slab here and there's a curb and it just kind of feels like when you're coming into it, you don't really realize, am I driving on the sidewalk? Am I going into a park? So we wanted to make that entrance a little bit more inviting. So I proposed, because I am a big green infrastructure person, we need some green infrastructure over the, taking that out, making a rain garden or bioretention, turning, this into both function and beauty coming into the park, putting in some wayfinding signs here at the entrance as well. And that will open up visitors to what's in downtown, what's in the park as well. That really helps merge. And then having a trail system that connects to the park and that'll come up and go into the downtown. And then the trail, if you follow the trail, it goes along Willis. And this is part of the trail alternative that I spoke about earlier. And here is the rendering of what it looks like now. This right here, this connects to their town square, which the train station, which they have already proposed upgrades to that as well. So the trail will bring people into that. And then this is an example of what the trail could look like. You know, a really fun crosswalk could happen, more greenery trail, just inviting. They have a really nice plan for the train station, and then some more wayfinding so you know where you're going. So we've kind of talked about what's happening downtown already, and then they're going to talk about the Bedford, the medical center, what's going to happen. And this rendering is we made a little adjustment because the alternative plans that they came up with from NOACA and the TLCI plan, they didn't know about the medical center being available to Bedford at the time. And they had the bike trail cutting across, I think it went in through here and it went down Center Street, the main street. And we proposed is, and you're going to see, they're doing some really, next slides, you'll see they're doing some really interesting stuff for the medical center. You'll come out and then go down Garden Street, which is a side street. It's a really charming little street. So you would go down the street. So this is the existing street. And then I put in a bike trail through here. And then you go down Ennis. And then here, there's already a trail that connects here to the rec center. And then the other park. And then actually, when you think about where the auto mile is, people are just sitting there waiting for their car. They can connect to the trail systems, go in here instead of sitting in there and eating their stale popcorn or whatever they have. You can go for a hike, go to downtown, visit some shops. There's a lot of opportunities available, which is why I feel like my part has been a really exciting part because you're connecting to everything. You know, the trail system, the Metro Parks is a whole extensive trail system. It connects to the whole Metro Parks. It connects to the towpath, the national park. It connects to the Ohio Erie Canal. You could go all the way to Cincinnati. Eventually, it will connect to, not directly, but indirectly to the American Great Trail, the Great American Trail that goes from Washington, D.C. to Washington State, which I think is a really exciting thing. So there's just a lot of opportunities that are available that this connection can help connect Bedford to the park and to the rest of the region. And next, Ethan's going to talk about the hospital site and the great plans that they have for that.
Thanks, Diane. To offer a little bit of context, we're going to transition from downtown to the hospital site. The former hospital site is located less than 500 feet north of the historic downtown. Formerly home to the Bedford University Hospital branch, this hospital campus ceased operation of its medical center in 2022. After a settlement with the city of Bedford, the 11 parcels that made up the site are now owned by the city. Bedford is currently undergoing an RFP to redevelop this roughly 14.5-acre parcel. With that context, our Capstone class has developed this reimagined site plan for the former hospital site. This plan seeks to add more roads, housing, and green space to create a more cohesive development for this disconnected block that is surrounded by residential streets. First, using existing impervious surface and curb cuts, we've added new roads to promote connectivity and integrate better with the surrounding area. This includes an extension of Elm Street, an extension of Washington Street up to Center Road, and then an extension of Garden Street. Next, in keeping with the theme of what's existing, we have added a new park where existing green space is currently located. Situated along Columbus Road, this park offers a great opportunity for programming with the adjacent Bedford Library just across the street. It could offer programs such as outdoor reading activities and other kind of variety of things. But it also offers an outdoor public space for the rest of the redevelopment proposal as well. Using the new road layout, we've produced 3 new areas of affordable townhome development. These areas will feature 2-story townhomes at 1,500 square feet per unit and come with attached garage parking. In total, this will provide Bedford with more than 70 units of affordable townhomes. And then lastly, to promote social connection, our Capstone class has proposed a new brewery situated at the north end of the new park. As our survey results have suggested, this type of development would be welcome in Bedford and offer an opportunity to create a space of community and gathering. This space has dedicated surface parking in the rear of the building and a multi-use pedestrian bike path that Diane just talked about in front of the building to offer a more seamless connection to not only the space in the park, but the rest of Bedford as a whole. To help visualize this concept, we've developed some basic renderings to showcase the massing. On the left, you've got the site plan as a whole, while on the right, Two different angles provide a visual representation of the height of the new buildings. In order to keep this development site contextual with the nearby historic downtown, we're actually proposing extending the historic design guidelines that Luke talked about up to this to incorporate with any new development. As we look to extend those guidelines, we've gathered some reference photos, for example. As mentioned on a previous slide, we're looking at a brewery with an adjacent park. On the left is an example of that concept here in Cleveland, Ohio, with Terrestrial Brewing, which abuts Johnny Kilbane Park. And then on the right, you'll see a couple examples of new townhome construction, which keep that historic feel in which our proposal aims to align with. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who will talk more about like the programming and the financial feasibility of the development.
Yeah, so as Ethan said, I'm just going to kind of go more in depth into the specifics of the programming and feasibility of the hospital site. So our biggest land use by far is adding 71 units of 2 and 3 bedroom attached townhomes, each with attached parking, which you can see around the site in yellow. 36 of these will be affordable for people making 30% of the area median income, and 35 of them will be available for people making 80% of the area median income. So this comes out to just under $500 a month in rent at the 30% restriction and $1,500 per month at the 80% income restriction. So these provide Bedford with high quality, affordable housing that fits squarely into some of the rental demand needs that we found while still matching the character of Bedford. So with all of the new connections here, new density and the feedback from our survey, we also wanted to provide something that's missing in the retail and restaurant market that will be an attraction for both residents and visitors, but not to be physically accommodated by any of that vacant space downtown. This took the shape of the brewery you see here in red in the center of the site. And then next, what was determined by the city that most of the site's existing buildings cannot be adapted for new uses. We wanted to try to retain the original really cool 1927 hospital building you can see at the top of the site in orange. This will become a mixed-use space with a handful of market rate rentals and hotel rooms. Along with the public components like turning the green space on Columbus into a new park, there's also some really cool progressive infrastructure built into the site, like utilizing solar carports in the public parking lots. So the total cost for the project is around $42.6 million. This is financed mostly through tax credit equity, with the vast majority being the low-income housing tax credit for the townhomes, with a bit of federal historic tax credits and investment tax credits for the eligible components there. We also have the city playing a very critical role as a partner here, contributing the land and a very impactful upfront TIF payment, developer equity, deferred fee, and a few different grants round that out. But overall, this seems to be a very preliminarily feasible project that the city could partner with the right developers for. And then lastly, I think it's important to justify the economic impact of any proposed development that involves public money, which for the city here, is through that TIF. So over 30 years, that upfront TIF payment would pay for itself in new city income tax revenue created by the project alone, along with the impact property tax would make at a very high level once that started back up. And then along with the tax revenue impacts, this should be catalytic for bringing outside visitors to Bedford for further growth and economic development. And we've discussed many important non-financial impacts that residents will benefit from through activating this site. So lastly, I want to bring up our implementation team to talk a little bit about strategies to take our plan from concept to reality. Thank you.
So now we're going to talk about some implementations. How are we going to make this happen? So we first want to point out some of our partnerships, some people we have here today. We have the Cuyahoga Greenways, Cleveland Metro Parks, the Cleveland Foundation, Bedford Gardening Club. Also on a funding level, when we're looking at some state and federal funding here, we have NOACA, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, which will sponsor some of those beautiful art pieces that we want to put along Bedford, Ohio Department of Transportation, and also that Historic Preservation Fund. So how are we going to do these things? We have some long-term ideas, we have some short-term ideas, we have some things that are easier to implement that we can get done soon, and then some things that'll take a little bit longer. So if you're looking at this first box here, we want to encourage wayfinding signage. We think that's something that is pretty easy to implement. We also want to bring an influx of businesses to this district. And how will people know about them? We think making some type of business directory where all the businesses are at one place will be really beneficial to this area. Another thing is we want to kind of endorse a variety of businesses. We've seen businesses that serve the same purpose. Let's get some businesses that serve different purposes here. And then we want to get people involved. How will people know what's going on? How will we get the community in the know? So we think we should develop a quarterly newsletter. And this could be something on social media. And then we also have to consider the different demographics of the people in the area. So maybe we can do some snail mail as well. Then looking here, some other things that are pretty easy to implement. The teamwork makes the dream work. So we get volunteers here, let people know that, hey, we want you here in Bedford, kind of get the community all together and feel like they're a part of these things. Also, which is kind of like a connection to our newsletter here, we can identify some year-round events to have people waiting for something. They're anticipating what's coming up next in downtown Bedford. We also talk a lot about instilling art. People want to be around places that just feel naturally beautiful and naturally welcoming. And then again, we talked about social media. In this day and age, everybody's on social media. So having a really consistent presence on social media would be really beneficial to the area. So some long-term things and short-term that are a little bit harder to implement. One thing we talked about was storefront renovations. So we know these are going through approval processes. I'm talking to council, government, and all of those different types of things. Updating those zoning guidelines. This also will take a strenuous approval process, all type of boards and those type of things as well. Reviving the Downtown Bedford Alliance, which previously served as their Chamber of Commerce. This will also take a little bit longer, so we have to reestablish some things here. And then everybody in this room is probably familiar with some type of development. It does not happen overnight. So we're going to repurpose this UH site. It probably wouldn't be something that would happen in 6 months. Some other things that are just a little bit harder to implement but could be done is street parking, or excuse me, underground parking, street lights, and then bringing on that new influx of housing that Chris talked about earlier. So I'm going to pass it on to Marcellus.
Thank you, Najee. Just building off of what Najee had mentioned, we understand that these development opportunities certainly take the resources when it comes to financing, but social capital is just as equally important. One of the feedback items that really was consistent was really volunteerism and that civic pride that's present, but really the need for even more hands on deck when it comes to sustaining some of the programming. So we're aware of the Strawberry Festival that's lively and popular for downtown Bedford, but being able to drive more momentum for year-round programming, whether it was a farmer's market, partnering with the Bedford Gardening Club to possibly manage the streetscaping or landscaping opportunities along the corridor, implementing historic walking tours with the Bedford Historical Society, or even integrating scavenger hunts to diversify walkability and opportunities to attract different age groups to really engage with downtown and current business owners. And again, just building off of the advocacy groups, whether that's a pedestrian safety or bike group that could be developed, community cleanups, or community service days. As we wrap up our proposal for Bridging Bedford, I think it's really critical that we highlight the key takeaways. And if there wasn't anything that you remember after you leave today, I hope you remember these things that's on the screen here in front of you. So when it comes to policy, we really emphasize updating historic design guidelines and leveraging the hospital site to include in those guidelines, in modernizing zoning to allow more building typologies and promote density within the downtown location. Really being able to address that vacancy, but also attract downtown redevelopment, we believe can boost local economy and be able to serve as interventions focusing on market building and property owner assistance. So whether that's special improvement districts, focusing on facades, or being able to really bring business owners to the forefront to talk about some of the areas that they may want to see or what's their pressing needs. Big emphasis on the hospital site. We understand that's critical to the future of Bedford as a whole. We believe that it's a strength that the city already has ownership of the site. So being able to really capitalize on that and extend the street grid to create more of a neighborhood connection along the site and beyond. Additionally, physical improvement. So how are we impacting the built environment, again, to really appeal to walkability, also complete streets, which I think it needs to be noted that NOACA is already an avid partner between the city of Bedford. There are upcoming funds through the TLCI funding. I believe it's earmarked for 2026 and 2027. So how can we be proactive in identifying what needs to be done to apply for the TLCI application. And then lastly, branding and placemaking. I think there is a really rich culture here in Bedford that really deserves to be elevated and promoted even more for people alike of all ages, of all groups. So how can we take the rich history that's already present and emphasize the storytelling by being able to integrate that with signs or programs? And then identifying, again, placemaking that can serve as a gateway. So whether it's the mural opportunity or even some type of bridge that connects to the downtown, not bridge, but gateway or introduction into downtown would play a pivotal role in amplifying a destination location. We understand that people really thrive for experiences, and this is something that we believe the branding and placemaking really would emphasize. And lastly, I just want to take a moment on behalf of my colleagues in Studio 17 to take a moment to thank the many people on this list here and those who may not be mentioned for your time, the guest speakers that came in to share your insight, share your thoughts on ways to bridge Bedford, linking the past and the future. We hope that this presentation serves you well in your subject matter expert as well as in the future. And again, just thank you for the time and the insight that you shared with us. We wouldn't have been able to do this without your help.